Today on Poddenham Podspur, I'm joined by Jack Hussey. Jack is the host of Rule The Roost, one of the most popular Tottenham podcasts, and Jack has evolved the show over the past decade or more. Jack talks about being a well-known figure on the Tottenham internet, originally as T-Trunk, and his work on Rule The Roost. Enjoy. Hi Jack, how are you?
Good, thank you, mate. How are you getting on?
I'm all right. Thanks for coming on. This is our second time chatting on a podcast. I was lucky enough to come on Rule The Roost earlier this year. So.
Oh, too kind. It's not luck. It's all earned. All earned. Thank you very much. Thanks for coming on again.
Yeah, it's good to chat with you. I mean, it's a weird time to speak to Spurs fans at the moment. We're at the business end of a pretty weird season. You've been kind of at the forefront of the battle of the hearts and minds of Spurs fans, chatting to people. You know, your podcast Rule The Roost is one of the most popular ones out there. I think it's a good listen. I've been a fan of yours for a number of years, so
thank you.
It was good to sit down today and maybe chat about where you've come, where you were at, that type of thing. So yeah, thanks again.
Is this before we all have the collective kind of breakdown if Spurs get relegated, right? And nobody wants to talk about Tottenham anymore?
I think that if anything, there's going to be even more hours and columns.
What am I saying? Yeah, of course. Yeah.
I just think about all those extra games in the Championship. There's all those extra podcasts you can put out. You know,
what's the schedule there? Isn't it like Wednesday, Saturday? Isn't it?
Jesus Christ. Plus our FA Cup and League Cup runs, because we'll have to get some glory somehow.
Are we in the Johnson's Paint Trophy too, or whatever it is at this point?
I really hope so. What's the one that used to be decided with cards? Wasn't there something years ago on Sky Sports?
Oh God! Oh, I just
they had the big Price is Right cards that they'd whip out. I swear there was something.
Yeah.
Some sort of fever dream.
Yeah. The night is dark and full of terrors, eh?
Well, it is the life of a Spurs fan. Why don't you, just for anybody who isn't aware of your background, do you want to talk about yourself and maybe how you became a Spurs fan? I think that's always nice to start these kind of career retrospectives that I do with how you got burdened with this life.
Oh, yeah. Well, just like many people, I inherited Spurs through my dad. Didn't grow up in Tottenham.
Yeah,
exactly.
Thanks.
Cheers. Thanks a lot. Yeah, I didn't grow up in Tottenham. I actually grew up in more like I didn't grow up in Chelsea, but definitely in a Chelsea area around Kingston upon Thames, if anybody knows that, the leafy edge of London, right in the southwest. So I grew up around there. My dad's actually from Argentina, funnily enough. I've sort of randomly mentioned it here and there on pods and stuff like that, and Flav often likes to poke me about it on Fighting Cock. But yeah, so my dad came over. When did he come? When he was a little boy. So I guess he would have come over, I think in the in the mid sort of 60s he came over. And I think there were sort of various different teams that he could have chosen. Manchester United were obviously a very big team back then, and Liverpool were very, very big back then. But he was growing up in like the East End of London, and just decided to choose Tottenham Hotspur. I mean, a lot of people are always like, did he choose them because of our dealers in Villa? But it was way before then. But Spurs were a good side, so he was between us, he was probably a bit of a glory supporter, which seems quite funny to say, doesn't it, of a Tottenham fan, and also quite funny to imagine the route that that glory supporting took him down from that point. But yeah, exactly. That's his penance, I think. Choosing what's the line from Indiana Jones? He chose poorly. So yeah, that's kind of it. So yeah, from there, I've carried the torch, and yeah, sort of at the school there were probably two or three other Spurs fans where I went to school around me. So it was mostly all Chelsea fans, and just loads of Man United fans, because basically everybody supported Man United back then when I was growing up. So. It was, yeah, really, really good fun being a Spurs fan at that time. And feels like we're going back to that time now, doesn't it, a bit?
I'm of the opinion that if you're of a certain vintage and you've seen us win trophy after trophy, you can't complain now. You've had your time. You've had your good period. It's us. It's those of us who were in our like, the millennials. Like if you're young enough, then you've come up Pochettino, then a Europa League. That's amazing. I would have killed for that back in 2005.
Exactly. This is it. Because so Charlotte, my other half, her dad is a Spurs fan as well, which is helpful. So he's Spurs, my dad's Spurs, and they will both kind of moan about Tottenham and this and that. And I think you both had the 80s where we won a UEFA Cup, and what was it, back-to-back FA Cups, as well as other FA Cups throughout that decade. We had title races. We had a lot. We had a lot of good stuff in the 80s. You lot got that. You have no grounds to complain, as I say. So that's kind of how I feel. But yeah, I think we have. What have we had here? I mean, I've had an FA Cup that I can't remember because I was too young.
Yeah.
But technically, I had, and 2 League Cups and a Europa League. To be fair, the Europa League. There's many times I've complained about Ange Postecoglou, but God bless you, Ange, for the Europa League. That's what I'll say.
Plus an Audi Cup thrown in there.
Yeah, lest we forget.
Yeah, exactly, and putting the pressure on. Yeah, it's not been fun. But do you think that carries over to the way you podcast, the way that you communicate yourself online?
I reckon so. I think so. I think to a degree, most Spurs fans carry that sort of gallows humor, don't we? I think that's kind of the tie, one of the ties that binds with many Spurs fans. I think that's one of those things that sometimes is maybe a bit lost in translation. And I'm not doing the whole old man wags fist at the kids on his lawn type thing. But as you said, I think there's maybe people who are just like a bit younger than us who have grown up with Spurs being, say, a much more successful side, that when I am a bit drier about Spurs or maybe a bit more kind of sarky about it, has people say, "Oh God, you're so negative about Tottenham." It's fans like you that are so negative about Spurs, and it's like I don't really mean it in that way. I don't really mean, when I say Spurs are completely useless and nothing good is ever going to happen to us, I don't mean it in a negative way. I just simply mean it in a Tottenham way. If that makes sense. Do you get where I'm coming from?
I think it's a little bit not a defense mechanism. That's too big a word for it. But it's just, we just get so much shit. I don't know if we internalize it, but we normalize it to a certain extent. You listen into Man United fans and they'll complain, but I don't think it's humorous.
No, and it's really tedious. I find, look, one of the things I find honestly so tedious about football, and especially football discourse now, when you're having, say, I think this is kind of when you've gotten to these points when Spurs have either been coming up against a Manchester United or, say, Liverpool under the Pochettino era, or latterly sort of Arsenal fans again, is the sort of many of the red mafia clubs, if you like, because they get so much smoke blown up their arse and everything like that, they sort of hold themselves to this standard by proxy, when there's just this level of, and I don't mind it when people talk about it in a footballing perspective, and if they say our club's bigger than yours, we've won all these things that you haven't won. Great, that's a fact and that's true, and that's part of football, that's part of sport. That's what people do. They it's a measuring contest, isn't it, at the end of the day, in a silly way. But it's when people start with that nonsense of, well, as Manchester United fans, we hold ourselves to this standard that you as a Spurs fan couldn't possibly comprehend. And, sometimes that bleeds out as well into Arsenal fans doing the whole like swamp dweller stuff and all that. And look, we're not beyond that. But I see Spurs fans say that type of stuff to West Ham and so on and so forth. It trickles downhill, if you like. Hopefully still downhill with regards to West Ham. But yeah, that type of stuff I don't really like. I don't really like the whole sort of judgment. So maybe I've done it a bit more in the past. Maybe when I've been a bit more rash and a bit whatever in my 20s or something like that, said these type of fans do this and those fans do that. All Chelsea fans are racist. All West Ham fans are, and all that type of thing, right? But really, for the most part, people just like supporting their football teams. And whether I support Spurs or Manchester United isn't really a reflection on my character. It's the fact that my dad supported them, and so I do too, because it's something to talk to him about, you know. Sorry, that was kind of a roundabout point there, but it's just something that just kind of irritates me, this strange sort of adopted elitism that certain fan bases have that is, I don't know, it's just a bit bizarre, isn't it?
It means more is the one that gets under my skin. Liverpool, it means more, because it doesn't mean anything to me. I'm just happy to have a nice day out.
I don't know if you remember, my head exploded. There was one day in particular. Do you know what? It might have actually been after the Champions League final. I think it was Trent Alexander-Arnold, and it was obviously Adidas or whatever social media team that Trent employs to do his posting for him. But he posted, "It just meant more to us," and I thought, fuck this. I'm not engaging. I can't do it. I can't be rattled by a brand agency. I can't.
Not again. Not after the Dulux dog.
No.
So do you think that kind of gallows humor influence is a big word, but do you think you used some of that when you became Tottenham's top ITK in 2009?
So, yeah, I reckon it probably did. So the whole, like, the name, the pseudonym thing, it came from, for a little while, I used to do, like, certain little Spurs articles on different little websites and things. So when I was, like, a kid, like a nerdy, I'm talking like 13, 14, I used to run a website called North London Pride, which now sounds probably either like an LGBTQ plus organization or a white supremacist group. But, yeah, you know, like it goes either way. But I can assure you that it was a Tottenham Hotspur website. And off the back
there's a market opportunity there between those two things.
Potentially. And I wrote sort of random articles here and there. One of them that sort of did quite well was me, in a sort of joking fashion, saying I was really good at Championship Manager, and these are the things that I did, so I can teach the Spurs. Who it was probably, I don't even know if it was George Graham or who. I can't even think about who it would have been at that point.
Maybe Hoddle. Like, as if
it could have been. So we're talking
what, like millennium. It would have been Graham or Hoddle, right?
Yeah, I'm having. Yeah, so it'd be that sort of period. Yeah. And I just remember putting one thing out there, and it sort of a few people being like, "Who's this? Who's writing this? Who's writing that?" And you know, when you're a kid, you do get a bit more scared about, oh, it's my name and people are out there. So it just came up with this stupid, a very dusty millennial thing is something called Leet Speak, L33T Speak, where you just write stuff stupidly on the internet. You interchange letters and numbers and all this type of thing, right? It was a very like online way of talking about things. So Ted Trunk it was just like a stupid name I had for when I was like gaming or something like that. Just nothing. There's nothing. Like I've often had that. Then what is it? What actually is it? It's nothing. It's just nonsense. It's just, oh, that sounds like a word combination that works.
Like a lot of those things, like I think it came from the Something Awful forums. Just that kind of internet speak, that early 2000s. Like it's ruined many of our lives.
Yeah, again, it's one of those like you had to be there things, isn't it? Really, that's just so it's just what people did. They were just stupid like that. So, yeah, I mean, so where the episodes. So when I started doing the animations and stuff, I'd just I finished a film degree, and I was, as many people do when they do like a film degree, you're trying to get opportunities. You're trying to do, can I do running on a film set? Can I work for a post-production agency? Can I do all these things? And you know, most of it is either low paid or unpaid. So at this time, I'm working in Marks and Spencer's behind the counters, while I'm trying to also find sort of different opportunities to do different things.
And it was a hard time to try and find jobs because that would have been around the time of the market crash. I had the same problem.
Exactly
well,
that.
I decided to go into higher education. I decided to go to just hide for like 4 years. But yeah, it was a tough time.
Exactly that. Like getting a job at M&S was genuinely like, wow, this is like a relief. You know, I can remember going into like a Domino's pizza at the time, and it would have been 2008. Putting like a CV down, just being like, "Are you hiring?" Because they had a vacancies thing up in the window, and the guy was straight up with me. He was like, "I've literally had about 50 today, mate. Like, but sure, add it into the pile, kind of thing." So it was kind of weird like that. So, but anyway, all alongside this, because I'd always wanted to make films. You know, I'd done a film degree, and I had all these lofty ideas of one day being a director or whatever, writer, director sort of thing. I used to sort of make short films, enter them into film festivals and all this type of thing. And I had an idea for a film once, which I wouldn't have had the budget or anything to make, or the expertise or whatever, but I'd always liked sort of Terry Gilliam's 2D style, animated stuff. And it started to be sort of popularized in a contemporary setting by a series called Phone Jacker as well, that had been on the TV in the UK on Channel 4. And so it's that kind of cut out composite style of, if you've got somebody's head, you cut their mouth out. The South Park kind of do it as well. It's a sort of the South Parky type thing, but
Newgrounds as well. Sadly, whenever I think of Newgrounds from that era, that I can't think of the name of the software, but you could. It was like a revolution at the time to be able to get in most people's hands to make their own animations.
Exactly, B3TA, Joel Veach, all these type of animators and things. Like I was like swimming in all of that sort of stuff.
Very beta would have been at the time.
Yeah, exactly that. So I ended up making this. I made this short film called Spaghetti and Chips, which, long story short, was like about a US mobster who has to go to the mattresses. His boss ends up sending him out to the UK. He thinks he's getting sent to London, where it's going to be Big Ben and sort of red phone boxes and stuff. But he gets sent to Croydon and whatever. And it was just it was looking at these sort of strange niche British anachronisms through the lens of like a US mob drama type thing. And I still maintain Netflix actually did this series called Lilyhammer a few years later that I'm like, you nicked my idea. They did. I know they didn't. It's a fish out of water. I know, whatever. I'm just joking. And so off the back of that, I was like, oh, I can actually make these things. This is quite interesting. And in a Spurs setting, what had happened is all the Spurs fans, all the Spurs players ended up getting pissed while Harry Redknapp was our manager.
God, I remember that. Was this the Ledley King photo? Yeah.
And he put them all on this booze ban. So he was like, no Spurs players going to drink anymore. You don't put diesel in a supercar, was always Harry Redknapp's sort of expression there. So I just suddenly, in my head, I was just suddenly like, Sham 69, hurry up, Harry, we're going down the pub. Do you know what I mean? So there was that thought in my head where I was like, I can just imagine all the Spurs players singing that to Harry Redknapp. Because the other thing I think Robbie Keane took them out for a secret Christmas party as well, when he'd put this booze ban in place. And so I thought, well, I've been making all these sort of different little short films and I've been sending them off to festivals and it's quite good, but it's not really, it's not really getting me anywhere. And like, especially when you're young, you don't really understand how it all works. You sort of like, I've been doing this for a year and, I'm not famous anymore. I'm not famous yet. What's happening, but you look for opportunities to sort of try and get your name out there. And I just sort of thought, look, I could actually make this. I could make this Sham 69 thing with Spurs players all cut out, singing various different verses about Harry Redknapp and all that type of thing. And so I made that, stuck it on YouTube, which was sort of fledgling at the time. And you got to bear in mind that like I'd stuck other things on YouTube before, and we're talking like 4 views, 3 views, that type of thing. I stuck this Spurs thing out online, and then probably within a week, I think it was sat on about 9,000 views, which to me was like, this is not only is this mind blowing, there's an opportunity there. I can do more of this. And so from that, I was just like, right, let me just write these little parody, spitting image type. Spitting Image, again, for US listeners, like a UK satirical show where they had puppets and they just did these sort of funny at the time sketches about different political figures or British establishment figures with these really grotesque sort of foam dolls. But I thought I can kind of do this. I can kind of blend a lot of these different influences and just basically write my own stupid short stories and fit them into into a Spurs setting, and just started making these episodes, which, you know, did quite well for the time, like for what YouTube was like at the time. It probably culminated. I don't know how many episodes I did, but it really sort of blew up when, and again, this is relatively speaking, but it really blew up around the time that Portsmouth were in severe financial trouble. They were on the verge of getting relegated. And I just thought, it was around Christmas time. I thought, well, I'll do another animation, which is like the Band-Aid thing, feed the world and everything, let them know it's Christmas time. But it was like, you know, don't beat Portsmouth. Everyone give them a break. So it was all different figures from various different clubs all singing about Portsmouth and about giving them a break and thinking of them this Christmas time kind of thing. Yeah, so that did really well, and I did a couple more episodes after that, but it was just such a labor-intensive thing, and at this point, I was starting to get more sort of jobs or opportunities and things. It was just too hard to juggle devoting hours, and they took hours. They took a seriously long time to make each one of these episodes. To like making those to, I guess, to a quality that I liked, that I enjoyed. Because I know it's that sort of lame thing, but people always say, you know, you only ever really want to make stuff that you feel like you would enjoy as well. And I guess when I was getting to the point when I didn't have time, I perhaps wasn't having as many good ideas for it. And there was also that bit of me that thought maybe the gimmick has run its course. Maybe in terms of like this being a sort of a constant thing. I just don't know if I've done this. I had a good moment with it and I really enjoyed it, but I don't want to just drain the life out of it for the sake of it. Like, although they're sort of silly flapping head animations, there was something about it that I did care about and I put a lot of time and thought into. And I didn't want that to just be something that, I know this is all like tortured artist bollocks, but I didn't want it to just be something that I just did for the sake of it because, right, I can get some numbers out of doing this, so I'm just going to keep doing it that way. And, as inspiration has struck like down the years, even like, I think like last year when Levy had to fly out and save the tail deal because Langer wasn't doing very well, I did a quick little animation about it because I was like, that's a little idea. And social media has sort of provided this platform where you can almost do like shorter little sketch type things now, which is quite fun. But yeah, that's kind of, sorry, I've really gone on a long time about that sort of thing. But yeah, it was good. It was a gateway to me, I don't know. I don't want to say all this lame, but like building a bit of a profile on like whatever it Spurs in a digital sense or whatever. And yeah, I mean, it's also, invariably, it definitely just was some experience for me in how to, I work in this sort of stuff now, like digital media, video stuff and all that type of thing. And being able to experiment with your own stuff and seeing what works and what doesn't gave me a good temperature check professionally as well, that I could carry forwards. But yeah, no, what was the question again?
Just talk to me about being Tottenham's top ITK that period. But yeah, I think you covered it pretty well, and it is important for establishing how you got known, what you were known for. It was known for humor. It was known for basically tapping into a part of the fan base that we were feeling at that time. Especially like Daniel Levy. Your Daniel Levy impression is probably influenced far too many people's perception of him than you'd like to than you'd care to acknowledge. And also that was just a period of time with I think it was a bit of the death of the characters in football before the real media training kicked in. You had Harry Redknapp's, you had people going out on the piss. Yeah, and I think you've continued that ability to tap into and listen to Spurs fans and what their concerns are and what they care about. And I think that's why you're so popular still, is that ability to see that and communicate it really clearly. I keep using the word communicate, but that's because that's what this all is. But it's multiple different ways you've done it. You've made animations. You have a popular Twitter following, social media following, podcasts. Obviously, like it's. I know you don't like to admit it, but or acknowledge it quite so strongly as perhaps I will. But I do think that there is a role that we have, especially those who have a big audience, in reflecting back and communicating these ideas about what's happening in the fan base. So it's kind of interesting to hear about how it came from an almost artistic viewpoint. I think a lot of people think of these social media and making animations and podcasts as just silly little things, but people should appreciate more that there's a lot of thought that goes into them and what you want it to be and how you craft what you make. Whether it be a podcast, whether it be an animation, whether it be a TikTok, I think there's a lot more thought than some people consider, especially for those that are popular.
Yeah, definitely. Yeah, and thanks. It's nice to have that kind of validated. Thank you for validating me in. But I think there is probably a certain pretentiousness about me, an artistic pretentiousness, I guess. I studied art and all that type of stuff. I studied film. I definitely do come at things from a creative perspective. I think I'm sort of one of those. I'm like a poor man's version, if we want to use the sort of crude analogy, of like, your sort of Tom Green's, Limmy's type people that sort of just appeared on that sort of line of like, I am creative and I like artistic stuff, but I'm also really tapped into like digital, nerdy, geek culture as well, which I think has carried forwards. I almost sort of want to say has kind of taken over a bit, because I kind of feel like social media, I feel like Vine and stuff really made a lot of like very niche types of creators mainstream, and TikTok has obviously picked up from there.
And we know of Spurs fans who are creating their own skits now. I forget his name. He's a comedian on TikTok. Flav's had him on the Fighting Cock, but similarly parodying things happening in the Spurs orbit. These really kind of micro niche, like comedy sketches, which you can see the DNA is in your works in the sort of 2010 period. And yeah, I think that creativity too is also seen in the way that you've evolved Rule the Roost. Obviously, you had some exposure to that being on season one of the Fighting Cock through I think you've spoken about knowing Flav through a forum. Is that right?
Yeah. So yeah, I've known Flav and Ricky since I was probably about 14 years old. They're a couple of years, 2-3 years older than me. So they were probably, 15, 16 or whatever at the time, but just stupid kids. We were all in this old forum. It doesn't exist anymore, THFC Latest, which we were some like teenage kids talking about stupid shit on there with a load of like middle-aged kind of dad guys who wanted to maybe have in-depth sort of chats about football and stuff while we were making prat jokes. And it didn't always go down that well with all of them, but so I've known Flav and Ricky for quite some time. And when Flav did start up the Fighting Cock, he was I'll be honest, I didn't even know what podcasts were when he started that. He sent me probably an MSN Messenger message, as it was at that point. Would it still be an MSN? I don't know. Definitely wasn't like WhatsApp, but
would your username have been something like XXX to trunk XXX?
Yeah. Lots of different sort of proto emojis. Something like that. And he just said, I'm thinking about starting a podcast. And I was like, I don't know what that is. He's like, you don't listen to the Spurs show? She's like, no, I don't. I don't know what they are. And I think I want to say in the early days, podcasts were like an exclusively Apple thing. I'm not 100%, but
I remember downloading them to devices. Like you had to put it onto your computer, then you had to transfer it onto an MP3 player. I can't remember. I mean, Jesus Christ, I'm like the wrong side of 40 now. My memory's shot. But,
yeah, isn't it?
And it's funny that you didn't listen to the Spurs show because you had on there obviously Phil Cornwall doing impressions and things.
Yeah, Phil Cornwall and obviously Paul Whitehouse, who is somebody I loved the Fast show growing up. Like it was unbelievable. So no, I didn't even know these things existed, to be honest. So he said, I kind of want to do like something like the Spurs show, but probably for just like for a younger audience, really, for people more like us that can, sort of talk about things in a slightly different way. And I was like, cool. Yeah, sweet. Let's do it. And so we used to rock up. His partner at the time used to run a sort of vintage clothing store up in Crouch End. And we all used to pile in there, sit around the microphone and record and just drink far too much beer and stuff for a weeknight. And, the sort of drinking that now sends a shudder down my spine. The thought of like, no, I think I'd die if I drank like that. And that's not even trying to be all like, oh, you're hard. It's just highlighting, what the spirit of it was like, a load of sort of 20-something guys just sitting around having a beer, sort of talking shit. And it was good, really good laugh. And then just that sort of that came to an end. And I sort of thought, well, I got quite a taste of that. I quite enjoyed that. And Raj at the time, so Raj Baines, who was, he was at that point, he was like a young journalist who had been writing in various different places and everything like that. He sort of said to me, like, it's a shame you've left Fighting Cock. I always liked your sort of perspective on stuff. I'd be quite up for doing a podcast if you are, sort of thing. And I think he used to run at that time. He used to work with Jack. Sorry, Jack, I've forgotten your surname, and I don't even know if you want it out there anyway. But Jack, who used to be the Spurs Statman on Twitter. So Raj basically ran the Spurs Statman website, and he was like, "Look, let's just do another podcast, and we can put it under the Spurs Statman banner and everything like that." And I was like, "Okay, yeah, let's do it." So we thought up the name. We came with Rule The Roost, and Raj and I we recorded that for a good 3-4 years. The first ever Rule The Roost, it was basically just after Gareth Bale went, or it was just around the time Gareth Bale was getting linked with a move away.
Yeah, you had Real Madrid fans on. I went back and listened to it. Yeah,
Basham and Kausic, who used to run like I don't mean any disrespect, but it was like a fairly generic sort of Real Madrid zone type podcast. But they were really good guys. Really nice to chat to them about what it's like being a Real Madrid fan, how much they loved having Luka Modric, and whether or not they were excited about the idea of signing Gareth Bale at that point. And it primarily centered at that point because we did want to sort of differentiate ourselves somewhat. We wanted to talk to opposition fans. So we thought that each week we were going to sit and talk to opposition fans about what Spurs fans can expect from their team. What's the sort of inside track? We can all sit and see what match of the day say about Watford or about Stoke or whatever, but what is it what one of their fans will say?
And to make it clear, nobody was doing that. Like, I don't think there were any other podcasts, at least in the Spurs orbit, who were doing that. I remember it being unique and like a really good reason to tune in. Like, I love the Everton fans used to have on. They were great.
Yeah. Bally inside. But I think it was just kind of one of those, like, it was just one of those sort of brainwaves that we sort of had where we were just like, why don't we just do that? Like everybody, there's already people covering the basis of just talking about Spurs. So why don't we just talk to opposition fans? And it was, it was really, really fun. It was really fun doing that for a couple of years. It was a challenge. It's a challenge always finding not only people who are available to talk, but also as you kind of get doing any sort of opposition fan things, people that want to talk in I don't want to be as like grandiose as saying respectful fashion, but in a fashion that's just conducive to people wanting to stick around and listen to it. Nobody wants to sit there and listen to an Arsenal fan glibly talk about Spurs being crap, as we did have with a couple of our guests back in the day who were never invited back on again. But it's the tone of it, isn't it? It's that you can sit there and say, like, have a bit of banter between Spurs and Arsenal fans, but there's always a level to it. There's always a level where I try and think about it in terms of like, would I want to sit in the pub with this person? Or just go to any sort of social occasion with this person? And you know what it's like, right? You know exactly what it's like. It's not to say that you can't take a joke, but also, when somebody's just being sort of like needlessly obtuse in their discourse around things, you just sort of think this isn't fun for anybody. Why are we doing this? Why am I inviting these nightmares into my life? But it was good. But then I think probably after a couple of seasons of doing that, you realise we're sort of having the same conversations with some of these people time and time again. What's the actual value we're taking from this? So I think naturally what we then did is like, well, we'll do the first half of our pod is us talking about Spurs. Then we'll have like an insert from an away fan, and then we'll end it generally talking about whatever we were watching on HBO that month. True Detective was like a big one. That True Detective season 1 was a big one that we were delving into at that point.
And of course, you brought another nightmare into your life in the form of Seb Stafford-Bloor, who was sorry, Seb, if you're listening.
The Premier League Owl.
Premier League Owl, yeah.
So the Premier League Owl, who he didn't really like wear. Like, I don't think he had his Spurs colours nailed to the mast, but there was always something about like we were talking about at the start about communication and everything. There was always something definitely very Tottenham about the Premier League Owl. And I think Raj reached out to him initially and was just kind of like, "You're a Spurs fan, aren't you? Like, I know it. I know you're a Spurs fan." And he sort of broke through the veneer, and we ended up. I think like Seb did. He probably won't mind me saying he didn't sort of fancy the idea of it at first. I think like me, he maybe didn't even really know what podcasts were. He didn't really get it. He was kind of like, "What, you want me to come on and talk about Spurs? What, like every week?" But in the end, he sort of came around to it. I guess he must have listened to it a bit and thought, "Oh yeah, I actually quite like the cut of this." And joined us for a bit, and then as it is with anything, life takes over, doesn't it? I think we probably had, I would say, probably me, Seb, and Raj had a good, I don't know. It probably isn't even this long. Like you say, it's the mind plays tricks, but I want to say sort of maybe just short of 5 years, maybe. Maybe
I
not
have the numbers. If
do please.
Yeah. So you became an official menage a trois on January 20th, 2015, and then I think you had a hiatus from 2018 to 2020. Does that sound about right?
Yeah.
Yeah. So about 3 years, but Seb had joined you a little bit before, like the season before, or something similar. Let me see. Yeah, he came in September 2014. So there was about a year before, I think. No, not a year. What's that? 3 months? Yeah, okay. So you had a little period of time. So it's about 3-4 years.
So, yeah, and it all just sort of naturally, it's no like, big fallout, no big drama or anything. It naturally came to a point where all of us just got more important at work, I guess, which is the sort of the thing that generally tends to happen. So yeah, we had a bit of a hiatus, and then COVID came along. Lockdown came along. Well, actually, so after a year after Ajax, I just dropped a random pod because I thought like I really I really want to do something Tottenham. I was working in like football production and everything at that point. I was working at 90 Minute Media. So just working sort of in doing digital stuff online for Spurs. And I just sort of thought, I want something that's just mine. I don't want something that I have to run through approval from this person, from that person, from the editorial department, the commercial department. I just want to make something where I can sort of use some of my production skills to talk to Spurs fans about the most significant event that had happened to Spurs probably since the double, getting to a Champions League final, really. And as bobbins as people want to say that is, it was like Tottenham in a European Cup final. Come on. And so I spoke to a load of Spurs fans there, and I just thought, I'll just stick it on the old feed. I'll just stick it out on the old sort of Rule The Roost feed, I believe, anyway. And then from that point, I think when it was like lockdown, Raj was like, oh, well, let's do a couple. Let's do a few more pods here and there. And so we started trying to slowly get it up and running again. And then I think Raj just found it just isn't compatible with like my life. It's just not compatible with what I do. I think he was
comms director at Huddersfield, right?
He is exactly that. So in terms of like his bandwidth, and also I think just from a work perspective, it's one of those things where I don't, I'm not here to say that they have said this or that. I just think it's always a consideration when you're working in comms for a football club that you probably shouldn't be out there talking about another football club. It's just something I think he had in his mind, and I think he was just like, I just don't think I can do this. And so I sort of thought, well, I've kind of gotten the taste for this again. Working from home makes this a bit more realistic. I think the fact that like we sort of we do work from home, maybe I can do this. So at that point, like before, I was using like just a fairly standard USB little mic for the most of the time, and I thought at this point, like, I'll tell you what I'm going to do. I'm going to buy a better mic. I'm going to try and add a better sort of production value to this, and go for it a bit. And what I didn't want to do, and I was very conscious of this because Rule The Roost was something that was built up by me and Raj, and also Seb as well. Let's not forget. But like, it was something where I didn't want anyone to feel that like they were being replaced. I didn't want to like be like, here's my new permanent co-host. Get rid of Raj and whatever. And I just sort of thought, what I can do here really is just like get loads of different Spurs voices on at all time, because it almost adds a different flavour to the show in some ways, because some people's voices, I think this is one thing that look, many of the podcasts do this very well, but I think Flav does especially well with Fighting Cock nowadays. He's a very good judge of like what type of characters you want on the panel, depending on the type of result that's happened, or the type of game that we're going into, or the sort of period around Spurs. And I sort of felt like I just felt like that's a really innovative and good way to approach podcasting in some ways, is to be sort of flexible with it and to be able to have different types of conversations that mirror the narrative that is going on around Spurs. And that is something I've tried to sort of cling on to with Rule The Roost down the years.
And find the chemistry. I remember Flav talking about trying to find chemistry with people, not just people who are names, not just people who are well known by Spurs fans, but people he would want to have a conversation with. Because you see that in some other shows. You just get on people for the sake of maybe you can get some eyes on this product, which is totally legitimate. But I think for a show like the Fighting Cock and for what you do, I think chemistry and thoughtfulness is super important, especially because you had that chemistry with Raj and Seb.
Yeah, I mean, there's some good moments from that back in the day. Chairgate especially, which was me breaking a chair mid-recording, because I was leaning back on a chair and it collapsed underneath me, and it's it's all there. Raj has never let me forget that one. But really, really good. And then I guess like latterly now, I listened to, for quite some time, I listened to like Bill Burr's Monday morning podcast, where it's just that stream of consciousness, him talking. Catherine Ryan also does a similar one that I listen to, where they just kind of talk about stuff. And I just sort of thought, I find this really engaging, actually. I really, really like this. I wonder how I could do this type of thing with Spurs. I just thought, just do it after a game. Look, I'm never, the thing is, I enjoy, well, I say I enjoy, but if I supposedly enjoy watching Tottenham, right? And for me, it's never been an option to do the Goldbridge expressions, whatever, you know, no side eye or anything. I'm just saying that watch along thing. I want to be able to sit there and be exacerbated and be emotional about football in the privacy of my own home or in the stands without it being like a show. Do you know what I mean? Because that's like what we're doing this for otherwise. And look, other people will appreciate it in their own way, and that's fine.
It's a very unique skill set to be able to do that and be engaging for what, 2 hours?
Exactly. You know, but I sort of thought, can I take at least a bit of that energy and rant, moan and stuff a bit after games? Yeah, maybe I can. Because as if this podcast is any evidence of this one we're having right now, Iain, if you sort of give me a push, I can go. I can blather on, much to probably the annoyance of my nearest and dearest around me as I gas bag on for hours and hours at a time. But at least
most of mine are 1 hour monologues too.
Yeah,
like, mostly because I can't schedule anybody because I'm on the East Coast of America. But I would just go on for an hour about, you know, podcasts. So I get you.
but it's I have found that for something that I thought like, oh, this will be quite fun, and also it might be, you know, not even in an entirely cynical way, but it's like, you do always look for like, how can I grow the podcast? When you get to a certain point, how can I grow it? What other things can I do to keep it fresh, to keep it engaging, to open it up to new listeners or whatever? And so that was always a consideration behind doing that. But it was also just like, do I think it would be fun? Yes, I do. So I'll give that a go. And I have found it great. Like I've really enjoyed it. I think like one of the things I find quite touching, but it's not even trying to be the like humble guy thing, is like people will say after those pods, they will be like the after game pods, they'll always be like, thank you for doing this still when it's so terrible and stuff. And it's like, you really don't have to, like, this is like mutual. Me being able to do this is like, it's actually really, really good. And seasons like this, when it's, I don't know how you manage to do this when it's like this. It's kind of like, it's because it's really helpful. Look, you know, I'm not trying to be like, you know, I appreciate that some people will find this type of thing perhaps problematic to say, but I do find it like a type of therapy. I do, for me, I find it like quite therapeutic. And I'm not saying that replaces speaking to an actual medical or mental health professional or anything like that. I'm using it in the very sort of, you know, day-to-day sense of what we call therapeutic, doing our gardening or, you know, tidying the house or whatever.
Self-care, I think, is a better word than therapy, personally.
There we go.
I'm sensitive to these things. I mean, but I get it too. It is. I mean, you know, call it therapy, call it whatever. Who cares, right? It's not important enough to get your knickers in a twist.
No, but still, no. I think it's good. Self-care is quite a nice way of putting it, really. And that's kind of how I see it. It's a nice way to just vent. And it's also a way to like make sure I check myself. Because as much as I sort of, I can get a bit wobble-headed at times, especially after that, especially after the Leeds game when I started going on about conspiracies and things. It's also a way of, it's just a way of just being like, look, you know, if you're gonna have some opinions about things, you got to back them up. If there's a few people watching this, I don't just want to sit there and be like, what's going to get me the most numbers? If I sit here and I shout and I gesticulate, you know, like that Arsenal fan used to do in his car a few seasons ago, when he'd scream and it gets picked up by Lad Bible and it gets picked up by this and it gets picked up by that. And it's all kind of like, sure, I'm not going to pretend that like, I don't have an ego, that I don't require validation in this way. Of course I do. I do a podcast. Like you say, I've experimented making short films. I've done this, I've done that. I obviously am the personality type that needs the validation from, I don't know, from an audience to do stuff. Like when I was a kid, you know, I always used to act in like the school play or go onto like talent shows and sing and all that type of stuff, right? Like,
it seems like you also seek connection. Like you talk about being on forums like early in your teens connecting with other Spurs fans. Not to say you didn't have them in your orbit in real life, but
I didn't really.
To really get out there and you did say growing up around around Kingston. Yeah, fair enough.
Yeah, and it's just yeah, definitely. So I want to. Obviously, I would love the podcast to grow. I would love it to be something that I could even, in some ways, like look at as like that's what I do. That's like that's not the reality of it, and that's not really the reality for anybody. But like you say, in a pie in the sky way, it'd be great to be able to do that, to devote more time to doing that, to be more ambitious with it and everything. But also, like, I want to enjoy it. Like I give so many hours of my life, and I'm not saying this like a martyr. I give so many hours of my life to it because I enjoy it. It's a hobby, like you say. It is a type of self-care, and so I don't just want to be completely guided by an algorithm or like a sense of like what's going to be popular or get me more notoriety by being that Spurs fan that does that thing. It's just it's not really for me, that. And I think fair play to like Robbie Lyle and everything, that what he's built with like AFTV, like it's truly remarkable now. It's a full-on GFN is like a full-on like broadcast proposition now. There, it's incredible, and it's
an empire. Yeah,
exactly. And
it's a legacy too. I mean, that's to a certain extent that'll be talked about for many, many, many years.
Yeah, but I think it would be. I don't think anybody would be being completely honest if they said that they've achieved that by being a wholly positive force, by being. They haven't always prioritized putting good out into the world, I don't think.
But you've managed to get some notoriety. I've been saying you've managed to get notoriety, especially with online fans, through being authentic, through doing what you want to do. I mean, you've written for the BBC, I think. You've been on Talksport, right?
I've not.
Was it 5 Live? I thought you've done some radio.
Yeah.
I didn't mean to diminish your achievements by saying Talksport.
That's Danny Kelly you're thinking of, mate. The other,
wobble-headed old man.
Yeah. I wish, and much love to Danny Kelly as well. If he is to listen to this, the Tottenham uncle. But no, it's good fun, isn't it? Ultimately, it's fun, and it's. I'm always very grateful to people that listen to it, and the fact that I do manage to connect with people, and the sort of crap I go on about does resonate with people, and that's nice. That's a good feeling, and it's fun. But the podcast has waxed and waned down the years. Early adopters, even Rule The Roost was still a pretty early podcast, and probably I would say the listenership on average was probably at its peak still bigger than it is today at that point.
But there's more podcasts now. There's that dilution of maybe more people listening to the podcast, but there's so many more now. And they're all catering to different niches and different needs, and people grow and age out of things and have less time to listen, maybe, especially if you're... There's all sorts of reasons for it. It doesn't mean that the quality or anything is... Or the engagement has dropped off. I think it's just there's too many.
No, there is, and also
I've got a podcast about podcasts. That's how fucking many there are.
And I get it as well. It's also like I get it as well. I'm not like some shrinking violet. I say stuff I've mouthed off about Ange and stuff, and people don't like that. People don't have to give their time to me. People don't. If they love Ange Postecoglou and they don't like hearing me slag him off and they don't want to listen anymore, that's totally their prerogative, And I don't really judge anybody for that, because we all have that, right? I'm sure you have plenty of podcasts, non-Spurs or not, Iain, where you'd be like, I really like this podcast, and then it goes through like the sort of phase where you're like, not really vibing with this presenter anymore or their perspective on stuff, and you just kind of go out of it. It's
it's my own podcast.
Yeah.
And you have got that connection there. You've got those in jokes and things. You got Ricochet Pig that comes up.
Still won't tell me who they are.
But these little things are just, again, those little connections. I think creating those is important for maintaining something, but also feeling like you're being heard. Like, it must be very validating to have a live stream of comments going underneath, maybe take out the gooners, maybe take out the people who are just there to yell at you, but to have these people wanting to listen to you, wanting to ask you questions and hear your thoughts. It's very cool. I do try to tune in, maybe not in real time, but like your podcast is one of the ones I go to after a game. Usually I'm sort of cleaning the house or something, trying to finish the day, but it's good to get that immediate reaction from people. And you also quite kindly don't put it behind a Patreon, which is no shame to anybody else who does it, but like you put that out there for people to engage with.
Yeah,
without
because
going somewhere else.
Yeah, it's fun. I mean, I do a preview, so I do the same thing as a preview version behind the paywall. But that's, I think stuff like Patreon is nice. It's a way of maybe perhaps one day doing more of my own sort of media stuff on my own, more of a reality. And
there's also costs involved. There's microphones,
there are, exactly.
There's not
recording
hosting
software.
Yeah, exactly.
There is stuff attached to it, but ultimately I'm not I'm not holidaying to the Bahamas or anything like that. It's that type of thing. But that's not what I do.
You need to maintain that. Oh, sorry.
No.
You need to maintain that level of professionalism too, because you have excellent guests on, and people who are associated with the club. I know Ben Haynes, for example, personally, but they don't want to just turn up on any old pod. You've got to maintain those standards for people to come on, and I think that's super important.
Yeah. Well, cheers, mate. Thank you. Thanks for noticing.
Be mindful of your time here, and I always ask two questions of people I interview. So I'll round out with those. The first one is, why do you think there are so many Tottenham content creators, podcasters, YouTubers, I guess TikTok people now? Like, what is it about this club and environment that wants or propels people to get behind a microphone and share their thoughts?
That is interesting, isn't it?
Because other clubs are basket cases in many ways and have been through ups and downs. They're big fan bases, but something about Spurs.
What's your tally out now? How many Spurs podcasts are you counting?
I think if you include podcasts and YouTubers, I think it's over 100. But we've lost so many people who've just down tools this year. But then we've picked up others. So, I think it's a lot.
Why are there so many? I think Spurs. Look, I think there's a template answer to this, in that Spurs do lend themselves to being the sort of team that people want to talk about. They're the exciting underdog, right? Because as much as people want to sort of slag us off, I think the reason why they do that a bit is because they know that Spurs could potentially be the team that does a Leicester one year, right? I think they all have that creeping fear in the back of their heads.
I've seen Villa fans express concerns that they need us to be relegated, because if we don't, we're a massive contender for their position in that top 5, top 4.
Well, I don't know if you saw TalkSport's video that they soon deleted.
I don't watch TalkSport. Fuck that.
So it was out on most of their social channels and everything like that. They had a literal TalkSport journalist sat there saying that, just outlying in straight fact, not even like as a comedy anecdote, that Newcastle need to throw the game against West Ham because Spurs are going to be more of a threat to them next year than West Ham are. And I think it was being pointed out by a lot of people, is you realise you're actually advocating match fixing here, which isn't good. Like you can't actually really do that. And so they, as soon as people started pointing that out, they soon deleted it. But look, why do so many people talk about Spurs? Why do so many people create content about Spurs? Look, I think one of Occam's razor, we are a big club. There's a lot of eyeballs on us, so it's an opportunity for somebody to make content that they know will be engaged with. But I think part of it, if I was to go a bit sort of, can I say wanky? but a bit.
Well, you just did, but yeah.
Yeah, I did. So if I was to go a bit pretentious about it, I do think there's something in what you're saying, in that like there's a connection. I think a lot of Spurs fans are seeking that connection, because I do feel that, and I know every single tap the sign, every single club will say this about their own club, but I do think Spurs are so uniquely poised in where they are and what they are, as in like we're not as good as the other big teams, but we're better than all of the small teams. And we just kind of exist in our own little thing. Maybe Villa have kind of caught up with us a bit. Maybe Everton will, maybe Newcastle will, but let's see them do it for, a decade, 2 decades or so, like Tottenham have done. And I think there's something very unique about being that team that is considered big enough to be spoken about by every single media outlet constantly, but considered small enough to be at the same time reviled and mocked by all of those outlets all the time. And I think we do seek that connection of like, I get you, I get that you're we all have that in any walk of life, right? And that's half of what meme culture is, and that's half of what internet culture is like suddenly, oh my God, this really unique thing that irritates me, right? For example, one of the huge sort of meme templates that goes around now is why it's so weirdly enraging if you're cooking in the kitchen and somebody else walks into the kitchen around you while you're cooking, and you feel seen. Everybody like, yes, it annoys somebody else. They can't put a finger on it. I can't put a finger on it, but it's a thing. And it's also like with Spurs, I think we all share this sort of weirdly brilliant but painful existence where we love so much about this club and at the same time despise so much about it, but will like completely go to bat for it at any time. It's the whole kind of, I can say stuff about my family, but as soon as you say something like, yeah, your dad actually is kind of weird, you say, hey, hang on a minute, you don't get to say that. So we're all in that together. And I just feel that like, look, every action has a positive and equal reaction, right? Lots of people talk about Spurs, so lots of Spurs will talk about other people and about ourselves as well. I think it's kind of a byproduct of that, maybe.
No, I think that all makes sense. Lots of different reasons. I've heard lots of different answers. I think they're all equally valid and just paint a big picture of why we want to get out there and how we want to present ourselves as Spurs fans. Last question. Any advice for people who are looking to start a podcast? You've got tremendous experience keeping yourself fresh, keeping it going, and speaking to other people.
I would say, I think one thing is, and I know this sounds probably quite trite, but decide on what it is that you want to say, because it's all and good to be, to have a consideration as to what works well, what doesn't work well, what you like, what you don't like from other sources, but also sort of maintain what it is that you're bringing into the conversation, and don't veer away from that. It's not going to be easy. It's not going to be quick. Like, these things don't grow overnight. Like, my pod now is getting into a decent place, but like you say, it's 2015, is it? We started it. So, or even
maybe
earlier.
A little before 2013, maybe.
2013. Like, it's been a long time. And prior to that, it's me.
2014, sorry.
Yeah. So 2014. And then prior to that, I'd been making sort of my animations and stuff from about 2008. Prior to that, been making all these different websites and stuff. So it's not, I haven't just decided to like make a podcast and then suddenly like people listen to it. I have worked hard at it, and I know this sounds like kind of self-aggrandizing stuff, but I will happily admit I have worked very hard to build the podcast and to build sort of all the different things that I do. And look, I can't lie, there's been an awful lot of shit posting on Twitter in between that as well, some of which I'm not always the proudest of when I look back on it, but you live and learn. But decide what you want to say, cling to that, and yeah, of course, build around that. Of course, every now and again, you can jump on a trend, or you can do whatever for like your social channels or something like that, but still maintain your voice, be authentic to that, and just be prepared to, not have a lot of people listen at first, not have a lot of people engage in it, but just be consistent. I think one of the biggest things, and I can't take this. This is some advice that was given to me, is if you are posting content, be consistent with a date. And if you can, a time. I still can't quite nail the being consistent with the time thing, but get your pods out on a certain day. We are all, especially people that listen to podcasts, creatures of habit. I build my week around, I listen to that one on that day, I listen to that one on this day, I listen to this at this time. You have to fulfill that for people. You have to be there. you have to be in the place that they want you to. You have to sort of give that to them. Unless there's a very niche UK comedian called Daniel Kitson who just kind of shows up when he wants to. He'll send an email out and be like, "Yeah, I'm doing some shows. Come if you want." Very funny guy. Very, very, very random. But yeah, so some people can get away with it. Some people can get away with it. But for most of us, yeah, consistency, work hard, stay authentic, and yeah, if you do get really big, if you take any of this advice and you start a podcast from this and get really big, then invite me on.
I'll bear that in mind when Poddenham Podspur is listened to by every Premier League fan, at least to mock us.
Good man.
But I'm terrible at that. I'm terrible at consistency, mostly because I think I look at this, I'm like, it's kind of small, it's kind of niche, nobody really cares, it's not really a big deal. But yeah, consistency is you gotta tickle that brain algorithm.
I've only really done it the past couple of seasons, but it's because a very good friend of mine that works in all this sort of stuff just said to me, like, your pod's good and you put a lot of time into it, but if you don't put it out consistently, you have to jump that hurdle, mate. You have to get that done. And so I was like, yeah, all right, let's give it a go. So it's something I've been focusing on, like, really the past couple of seasons in particular, I would say. Other than the post-match things, which I have been doing for... You might even have this data in. When did I start doing the post-match ones?
Let me have a look. Do I have that? I don't have that one.
I want to say this is my third season of doing a post-match. But it could be the fourth. But I think it's the third season of doing post-match.
Because Raj left in 2022. So it would make sense that it was sometime between then, and I remember you doing it for a few years. So yeah, that makes sense. So I'll leave it there. Thanks again for your time. Is there anything to pitch? A couple years ago, and I miss it, was your retrospective of seasons based upon the shirt that was worn at the time. That was great. Anything like that on the horizon for the summer?
A stitch in time.
That's it.
Well, I mean, I will definitely be doing some like more stuff over the summer. Patreon. I'm trying to. It won't be the Spurs wipe again. Spurs wipe was definitely something I could only really do because of lockdown.
And I wanted to talk about that, but that'll have to be for part 2 because this is
sure. But along that vein, I want to expand on. There was a little bit in Spurs Wipe that I worked on with Spooky about modern football and all this type of thing. I'm sort of deciding right now whether I want to do like a video documentary thing or a podcast series about just essentially looking at all the different reasons why people say football is now bad, why they don't like it anymore. There's a growing amount of voices of people saying it's just not like it used to be. And I don't think the reason why I think it's a bit different is because I don't think it's just your Dar type, it was better in my day stuff. I do think right now there's something really sort of maybe existentially flawed about either football or us, the way we appreciate and enjoy stuff now. And so it's very, very, very early on into planning, but if I get the headspace, if I get the time, if I want to try and start focusing on this thing, getting it made, and I probably will put more time into it in the summer. But yeah, I might do World Cup pods. Is that all right? Yeah, I might do that. So that on a more sort of easily actionable thing, I'll probably do some World Cup reactions and stuff like that too.
Oh, great! Thanks again. I'm sure that most people listening to this know where to find you, but do you want to drop something here anyway? I'm going to edit that out. That was fucking awful. All right, Jack, where can people find you online?
Rule the Roost podcast, please, mate. Or so that's on, so you can, I don't even know I'm on Instagram, which I don't really use. I just put some clips on there. See also TikTok. But Twitter, if you want to come for bad, hot-headed takes at Tetrunk, or listen to me on Rule the Roost podcast or watch it on YouTube.
And I'll drop all those in the show notes for anybody who hasn't checked out Rule the Roost. You should. It's good.
Thank you, mate.
Yeah, thanks again. We'll Up the Spurs.
Up the Spurs. I really appreciate it, and thank you very much, mate.
Why are there so many podcasts about Tottenham? Do I want to know why? They might contain insight, but mostly delusions. If I hear one more, I might die. They don't like Levy and they don't like Enoch. They pine for Moo and Conte. Someday we'll like 'em, old Tottenham Hotspur, the podcast clout chasers and me.